Hello everyone, welcome to the Delhi Birth Network Community Resources Series. My name is Neha Misra. I'm a childbirth educator and a birth doula, and we have Divya with me. Divya is, as we know, she's a doula. She's worked with hundreds of couples, supporting them during their birth over the last 2 decades. But what many of us don't know is that she is also a craniosacral therapist, SE practitioner, which is somatic experiencing, and she's also studied pre and perinatal psychology very deeply. We today are going to talk about birth trauma. It is the Birth Trauma Awareness Week. Birth trauma is something that many of us don't really understand and don't acknowledge it. The system doesn't really acknowledge it. And only now this word really has started being a little visible on social media. So let's try and understand. Divya has worked extensively in studying, understanding, and supporting people who have experienced trauma, which is actually most of us, I think. So let's understand what it is about and what it means. So Divya, if we can begin with a basic understanding of what is the meaning of birth trauma.
Okay. So thank you, Neha. You can't understand birth trauma unless you understand trauma itself, because then birth trauma will become that which arises out of birth, and that would be simpler to understand. So many people think that when there is an event which is really too much or gruesome or really injurious, like an accident or a surgery, that may be traumatic. And body workers, people who work with SC, the explanation was given by Peter Levine, Dr. Peter Levine in SC. And it says that it's not really the event, but it's the capacity of response that will define trauma. So, and the simplest example he gives is that when animals live in the wild, their life is threatened moment to moment because there are predators. And yet they don't have any PTSD or, any traumatic symptoms. Because they can seamlessly respond to the event and process it, integrate it, and move forward in life. So he looks at it, because it's body work, he looks at it through the nervous system. If your nervous system has the capacity, that's part one, and the resources, part two. So everything is not just capacity. Sometimes my capacity for something may be low, but I may ask for a resource from somebody else. A very good way of understanding is we look at finances. I have a certain bank balance. My need for money in this particular moment is bigger than what I have, but I can find a resource to borrow money without too much interest or load on me, and do that, and then earn slowly and process it and return the money. No trauma. But if I have just a small amount of money and have a large spending, that's trauma. And every nervous system has a certain amount of resilience or capacity to be able to take in daily events, process them, and move it through. And that could be a physical capacity, that could be emotional capacity, that could be a spiritual capacity. So there are many things that build into that capacity.
In the context of birth, what are the events that could possibly cause this kind of stress or trauma for the mother, for the baby, for the father?
Oh, okay. So say if the nervous system needs an event that does too much, too quick, too long, and too soon. All these, which means I was still working with this and then loaded, or constantly being loaded. So look at the way births are. You and I both meet pregnant women. They're under constant stress about pain, labor, sense of loss of control, too much. It'll be too much for me. I don't know if I'll be able to cope or not. I don't know if I can take the pain or not. What if everything does uncertainty? Too long, that's prolonged as well. So we are already living in a paradigm of too much. So then what would then turn out to be traumatic for women or families? Long labors, not progressing, too much pain. Physically sustaining that kind of pain also eats away at our capacity or resilience. Lack of support, very important. Loss of control, too much, too soon, too quick, and too long. So anything that fits into. sudden emergencies.
Yeah.
Considering that I was already thinking about what if it doesn't go right, and then there's an emergency.
What I find most interesting is the fact that it is not the event. It is your ability, how you perceive the event and how you dealt with it. So just a long labor may not be traumatic for everyone.
No.
If a woman is well supported, if she's confident, if she's, feeling good about it and she knows it's part of the process, she won't be traumatized at all. But if a woman is afraid, wondering why it's taking so long, doesn't have support, have people around who are probably making her more afraid, the exact same, assuming that the same kind of a labor can feel very, very different.
Yeah, the quantifiable element is the time. The same length of labor may be perceived differently by different people, and humans are so nuanced. So firstly, what was her expectation from that birth? That's the preparation. The preparation isn't about how many duck walks I will do. And, important as that is, the mobility of your pelvis. But it isn't just that. It's also the expectations. So if I do the 100 duck walks, thinking that I will have an easy labor, my expectation is easy labor. Then a harder labor or a longer labor is too much. How do we look at sense of control? My sense of control can come from my expectations, the way my care provider talks to me, how I'm met on a human level. That is support.
Are the decisions, do I feel like it is a joint decision? My care provider suggested something, I found it something that I need, and I was part of the decision-making process, or is it something that's being thrust upon me? You need to do this.
Yes, you need to do this, or they don't even sometimes give you time when they say baby's at risk. That's the speed of it, too soon. Or too quick. They've not given them time to talk about it. Versus even if, say, it's a decision that you know that this is the only option left. Even then, just making time to process, to acknowledge that, yes, things are not going the way you want. This must be really hard for you. There is a certain human element to it. There is a certain integrity of the person going through that experience that needs to be acknowledged. And unfortunately, instead of that, we hear, I don't know why you're complaining so much, at least you're safe. That's a complete dismissive nature. Something very interesting came to my mind, Nina. I want to say it here. When we talk about children, we say that, we talk about abuse. And we think of abuse as something beating you up or being mean and cruel to you. If you see literature on child development and child psychology, they say neglect is abuse.
Yeah.
And if you look at the world around you, if you neglect your home, it will go into disrepair. If you neglect to put the food in the fridge, it will get spoiled. If you neglect a baby, it's abuse. But when we don't listen to women in birth, isn't that neglect? We're neglecting them. And that is also like a drain on their capacity constantly. And it happens too long, throughout their pregnancy or throughout their labor. Imagine women who can't talk to their doctors about what they want, or if they talk, are shut down. Their fear response or the defense mechanisms are high. And so that, when it's not given due credit, acknowledgement, respect, and time to process, that will become trauma.
I think that from what you're saying, it almost feels like birth trauma is inevitable in various degrees, because that's the environment in which most of us are giving birth. And therefore, which is why this topic is so important. So can you tell us, how does one know if you've experienced birth trauma, if you're feeling traumatized by your birth experience? What are the signs that kind of tell you that?
So you will re-experience the event many times. It'll keep coming back. So, while you're saying you're reliving it, perhaps your body, because your body is designed to heal itself, it is bringing up the same opportunity or the same experience again so that you can slow it down and process it. You can't go back and change it. You can blame, but that won't help you either. The body does not understand the nuances and the layers of what we say of programmability of the brain. It's very in the moment. I'm feeling something, I'm giving you an opportunity to say it, do it. And so in trauma, we say it's like you are wanting to respond to something as a defense, and then you are clamping it down because it's not appropriate. So you have your foot on the accelerator, you have your foot on the brake, and can you imagine the generation of that energy in the car and not being able to use it? So the engine is literally bursting with that survival energy. Our nervous system is like that. So it'll bring up the trauma again. It'll bring up the event again. You can help take it out. You might also avoid things that might trigger those thoughts. And sometimes it can't be what happened because your body is protecting you by not remembering that. And you're saying, oh, everything was fine with the birth. But the things preceding it, which is, trauma -1 event or -2 event, and those can become a trigger. Every time you say, I have to go to visit the doctor, that's traumatic. I can't do that. I want to avoid that. Because when I went to visit the doctor, she told me the baby's at risk. I had to do a surgery. So I've conveniently said, but even though it was a C-section, I'm okay with that. But going to the doctor is traumatic. Guilt, shame comes up highly in trauma. Because where do you put this stuff? How do you justify it? That could be your bonding problems. You might have problems with feeding. It's a big drain on your energy because you're holding that engine all the time with that survival energy pumping in. That could be. So these are some of the things you'll see. And these are different than what we call baby blues, where you're swinging up and down, but you're still in relation with somebody. You still want to at least reach out in the times that you're coming up, you reach out, you still have kind of a connection with the baby. And of course, that connection with the baby then settles down things. But here you are unable to find connection.
So normally, in a normal circumstances, having an emotional roller coaster is normal. You will feel overwhelmed at times. You will feel out of control. You will feel like you don't know what's going on. And then after some time, it settles down. And then, you're feeding the baby and you're feeling good, or it goes down. But when it doesn't go down and it continues to stay there and makes
with the same intensity.
Yeah. Then that's the problem.
That's the problem. Also, then, what might happen is that even if it's a little bit activated, the support of the family might help discharge it.
Yeah.
Giving you time to rest, talking about your birth. Somebody says, just simple, a simple sentence saying, oh, so how did that feel for you? And then letting them slowly enunciate the feelings. That might take it away. But what if the support is not there? And you're feeling now even more overwhelmed in capacity to look after the baby, then the guilt will come. I'm not a good mom. I don't have enough milk. You're kind of blaming yourself for everything.
Yeah.
And that continues. It just doesn't dissipate till you had a chance to process and integrate. And that could be a lifetime.
So if we are to give some suggestions to partners on how they can support new moms, what are some of the things that they can keep in mind, and what are some of the things they can say and do that will help her to deal with and feel more resourced with dealing with something like this?
It starts with listening. Listen to the mother before she begins. It's great to have an idea of the birth you want because everybody wants to give the best to your baby. But maybe take a little time and say, I know you want to do for the best of the baby, but as you're saying this, how does that feel for you? You may feel motivated to do it, but you may even feel bogged down by it. Oh God, I have to achieve that. Listen to that. Resource her. Give her all the information she needs. Respect her own, whatever she feels is her limitations. Why not respect that? Don't you think that we are a product of our experiences and where we are coming from? We're not in isolation. So respecting that, making sure that relationship with the care provider is, you are the buffer there. Sometimes that is very important. And it could be cultural, but I find that sometimes when the fathers are also involved, the doctors listen. Women are usually dismissed, but men not so much. Right? So that could be a way of supporting her, being there, identifying your own ability to be there for her. And if not, get another support person.
Yeah.
It could be a family member, it could be somebody she trusts, it could be a doula. A lot of people think that if the family is supporting her, what would a doula do? The doula would take the pressure off the family and they can just be emotionally there, not having a list of all they have to do. So, you can't have too much love or care. Have another person there. Name your own challenges. Because if your jug is empty, what are you going to pour into her cup?
Exactly. I think that's a really important one. Just regulating your own self.
Yeah.
And checking into whether you are carrying some negative experience
Imprints.
yourself. Yeah.
You know, and you'll find that voice come out, Neha, when we talk in prenatal. The mother has a certain perspective, but the father may have a completely different perspective. Then you wonder where that's coming from because he's carrying his own traumas. You know, what if the story this little boy has heard from his mother that I almost died giving birth to you. Not even a birth trauma, just the language. So in his brain, precognitively, the memory of birth is equal to death, and then he's looking at his partner and his child, and what does that bring up for him? So this is a nuanced thing, and this is why that I feel that all birth workers should have some amount of trauma-informed care training to become sensitive at least. What are our biases as well? But to go back to the story of the partner supporting, knowing that birth is unpredictable, when things don't happen the way you like them to, or they should have been, or you had desired, taking the moment to acknowledge that for her and not give her an explanation of why she should feel the way she should feel, but to say that this must be really hard, just an acceptance of that. I know we are very tough to accept that somebody else is going through a tough moment. We want to fix things, wonder what that says about us, but it's hard. And the next question could be, what might help you?
Yeah.
Just be with this, not get better. Don't try and make it better, because that's dismissive of her experience. What might support you to be with this challenge? It could be time, it could be tears, it could be a shoulder, it could be a rant. I don't know. But she does.
Would you say that a majority of women are capable of dealing with and overcoming their trauma on their own with the right kind of support? And what is the point where you need to seek some professional support and reach out to a trauma therapist? When do you know that you are at that place?
Let's start with care. I think women can get more resilient and have positive experiences, and we know that about positive birth experiences when they have a team of care providers, which includes family, partner, maybe their childbirth educator, their doula, their physiotherapist, their prenatal educator, all of them. That's their birth team who are building capacity, not physical, but a realistic expectation and capacity is supportive. A care provider who listens to her and has a discussion with her of the possibilities, good, bad, and ugly. That woman's propensity to get traumatized anyways decreases. And so how much we talk about midwifery model of care, because there's a lot of communication happening there. There's a lot of counseling, hearing, listening happening there. We do that in our doula work as well. We listen. So that's the first step. Prevention is always better than cure. But life is unpredictable. What happens in the moment can also be very supportive. And then what happens afterwards would be a small segment which would take care of it. And then we would want to see how many women would truly fell through the gaps. But right now, all of them are falling through the gaps. The very system is designed against it. And that is because medical care providers look at physical injuries as trauma. So if she's alive, there's no trauma. Body will heal itself. And there's the mismatch.
And I think that's not only medical care providers, but the entire society. Everyone is only looking at baby is healthy, mother is healthy, दोनों जिंदा है, तो फिर क्या problem है? Why are you complaining?
अभी तो problem है, अगर जिंदा नहीं है तो क्या problem है?
So that's the thing, the limit, it stops with that. The baby is healthy, what's the problem? So that sensitivity to what else is going on with the mother and with the baby is really low, and which is why it's really important for not just the birthing woman, but for anyone in the society, especially families who are supporting birthing women, to understand what this means, what we spoke about, and how they can really play a very important role, not by knowing anything, just being sensitive, just listening, and just offering loving, unconditional support.
But also when we educate, say as educators, when we educate women, it's how we present our material. There is a subtlety to it, which says, we talk in our communication module, we say that body language, tone of voice is a large part of communication. How we communicate, the words we choose, the context sets her up to an expectation, which may even be judgmental. This is good, this is not good.
Yeah.
Now, this is good. I need to do this. I feel petrified in this situation. I cannot talk to anybody for the fear of being judged. Look at her capacity to deal with that situation. Not to say that that stress itself leads to a less than optimal outcome, and we know that because of physiology. But look at what is happening in her resilience or in her capacity to take up an event. Versus, this is how it works in nature. These may be the variations. These are the offshoots of these variations. Where are you? Choose. Now, if you let her say that for a moment in your class, she might choose point A. But the fact that she had a choice and she was not pressurized and didn't need to defend or judge or things, she might shift towards the paradigm that is more closer to natural. That's potential for growth right there.
Okay. Finally, I mean, we've heard a lot about trauma from the mother's perspective. Can you also tell us a little bit about what is the meaning of birth trauma from the baby's perspective? Again, this is something that is missed all the time.
Completely.
And most of the narrative around birth trauma is about the woman's experience and how it was. And no one is realizing that the experience of the baby could be very different from what the mother is experiencing. So just throw some light on that to give us a sense of what that is all about.
So, I'm going to jump into that in a minute, but, I think I want to even qualify what you said a little bit more. A large part of what we are looking as trauma, we are looking at what is happening to the mother, not her experience of it.
Right.
So we are looking at intervention as trauma, C-section as trauma. We're looking at, we're looking at what is being done as trauma, the event. We're still there, not her experience of it.
Yeah, I think that I personally have seen the meaning of that in my work. I mean, there are births where I felt traumatized and I felt this must have been really hard for the mother, but it wasn't. She was really feeling amazing about how her birth went. And then there were births where from outside it looked like a really nice, good, smooth, natural birth without interventions, but it may have not been the same for her. She must have felt overwhelmed.
Too much.
How fast?
Too much, too quick, too long.
Yeah, so that's a really big and important realization and understanding to have about trauma.
Especially if you're doing birth work. Yeah. So yes, so coming to the babies, and I think that's where my heart goes, because I was induced with my first, and that's been a pursuit for a very long time, and that's what takes me to pre and perinatal psychology. So the babies are pre-coded with a certain sequence of being born. It's almost like a biological expectation. This will happen, this will happen, this will happen, and their body systems are designed for it. Let's talk about birth. As babies come out, their necks first, and they meet the tissues which they're pushing through, their neck goes through compression. It's designed for compression. Versus a C-section where they may have been lifted. That's an extension. And that neck with its cranial muscle nerves that go into their jaw, sucking, eye contact, is not meant for elongation. So there may be a potential of actually physical injury or trauma. But for the baby, because the experience is from the body, is the sequence interrupted? Were they brought out too quickly? Or were they premature? What was it that told them staying in is not okay, let's go out? What was that feeling? Was that then contained by the mother's experience? So the baby who has, say, an induction, and the mother is in communication, is the support, layer of support for the baby, saying, I know this must be hard, you'll be surprised by what is happening, but you're okay, I'm okay, I'm going to see you soon. Even a C-section, emergency C-section. I have this little ritual. If it turned into an emergency C-section, I'd say, you have the first 5 minutes to rant. This is not what you had. I think it's a loss of your plan or your experience. And then I'd like you to focus on the baby and remind the baby, this is your experience, but you're still welcoming the baby. And it was amazing how well they buffered it. And William Emerson wrote a whole testament on it about obstetric interventions and what they might have for the baby. What he noted, which was shocking for me, is that 95% of babies are traumatized by birth in today's world. Fortunately, 45 will resolve themselves. And I know this is a topic that you like, and that is in skin to skin contact with a mother who's well supported. Because
Absolutely.
her nervous system.
While on one hand, it's scary to hear that so many babies are born feeling traumatized by what just happened, but it is so reassuring and kind of optimistic to know that there are so many ways that nature has given to help babies to come back much more easily, I think, than us. We are still a lot more cognitive and are keep thinking about what happened and why it happened. Babies don't, they're in that moment. So no matter what happened, the baby comes back to the mother's skin and the mother is welcoming the baby and is talking to the baby and is settled herself. That's it. That is usually enough, and then whatever happened before that kind of resolves on its own. So there's so much power in that, you know, the fact that it's not that hard to support babies who have been traumatized, and there are situations that are beyond our control. There are babies who may be in the NICU after birth, who may be
So
separated.
what is that percentage, Neha?
No, I'm saying even in that percentage, that
Even
percentage
then,
unfortunately is quite high nowadays. So that's a different story. But even in that situation, say it happened, when the baby comes back to you, start off where you left. Put the baby back on your skin. Let the baby familiarize. Let the baby hear your heartbeat. Let the baby regulate with your nervous system.
yeah,
And
let it hear your heartbeat, which is quite steady, not escalating.
all you need to do is really settle yourself, and the baby will take care of himself. You don't have to make the baby calm or make the baby stop crying or make the baby breastfeed. The baby will do all that on their own. You just take care of yourself and give the baby that field in which the
The
baby can.
mother feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know that Niels Bergman says the mother is the habitat of the baby. But again, we talk about capacity. Some babies who were having a great pregnancy, completely connected with their mothers, might go through the worst of a birth and come back, and that's just an event in the whole stream of their life. But babies who are already compromised by anxious mothers or maybe a threat to the mother's health, and she's just carrying this pregnancy through, and that's a whole story behind. Might take even the slightest of intervention or break off sequence as like, I don't know what will happen next. And one of the biggest trauma to babies is separation. They have separation anxiety. They have a buildup of adrenaline in their body that helps their birth process. And what we need to do to that is to settle it down, because it will move from adrenaline to corticosteroid if exposure is long. I mean, on a very physical basis, and we all know what stress hormone corticosteroid, steroid does to our bodies. We all know that. So again, we come back to that separation bit, no? Because if we are leaving them there, we know the baby is safe, but does the baby know he's safe? As far as the baby is concerned, mommy and daddy person have left him and gone. End of story. There's no time. They'll be back in half an hour. I don't know time. And imagine the intensity of contact and then that utter separation. It's also how we talk to babies, or actually don't talk to them at all. We talk over them. So, you know, their heart rate variability you can read that when you speak to them or to them, they are sensitive of that when they're being spoken to or they're spoken above them. So imagine you're having a NICU experience where people are talking about your health in life and death, and you are just like, oh my God, I can understand that. And that's trauma.
I think that this whole subject is so vast and so fascinating. And to people who are listening, I think they should go check out your Talking Tuesdays series on My Child First. They do cover a lot of this in much detail, and it's something, I mean, even if you don't want to attend a birth class, don't, but this is something you should know. You should understand who that person is and what that person is capable of. I mean, the baby, and what that person, what that individual is all about. And when you do that, then everything else you know the answers for. You know you shouldn't separate the baby. You know you should regulate yourself.
Yeah,
You know you
nobody
should.
needs to tell you that.
The answers all come. You don't need to know those things. Just need to appreciate. That's it. So yeah, it's a huge topic, and I know we can go on that topic. But thanks so much for this, for your time, and I hope that we've been able to help people get a sense of what birth trauma is all about. It's a huge, vast subject, and we'll probably
Um,
keep talking about it.
yeah,
Oh,
I also want to add a note that sometimes hearing this conversation is very difficult. And that tells you something, because one of the signs is to avoid the subject that brings up that trigger. And since Delhi Birth Network is a community resource, and this is resources, we are available to you. So people who've been done doula training with me and has completed it, which is Neha here in Delhi, uh, do know how to work with these triggers, not as a treatment, but as a support layer. And of course, I'm also available if any of this talk brings up something for you, which might be activating or which might be in some way uncomfortable, please reach out to us. That is what we are here for. I did want to add that because
that
it's
was
really,
really
really
important.
important.
Thank you so much, Divya. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.